Hi, I'm Matthew Knowles, and I'm sitting right here with Hip Hop Weekly.
Mr. Knowles, a pleasure to have you here today with us to talk about your new book, Race from the Eyes of a Child. This is your second book. It's number 2. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, Tajian, first of all, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to just talk about my book, Racism from the Eyes of a Child. And, my first book, The DNA of Achievers, I was grateful that was number 1 on Amazon. And we're number 2 on Amazon, and number 2 just says that we're not working hard enough. So in the Knowles family at Music World, we don't accept number 2. So hopefully, your audience will be the one that we say in a couple of days that was that final push that was needed to take it to number 1.
You hear that, guys? After today's interview, we're going to go out. We're going to get this book. We're going to push this man to number 1 on Amazon. All right?
Thank you.
All right. So tell us a little bit. What was your thought process behind writing this book?
Well, I grew up in a little small town, Gaston, Alabama, which is not very far from here, actually. It's an hour and a half drive, 2-hour drive on I-20. When I grew up in 1952, so do the math, I'm 66 years old, I was one of the first blacks all throughout my school years in Alabama, all the way up through high school. I never went to a black school.
Sounds familiar.
Never went to a black school. We were talking before. You can relate to that.
I can.
However, it was a different era for you. I'm talking in Alabama in the 50s and 60s. When George Wallace was our governor, it was a different era for black folks. We were just really 2 decades away from slavery.
Right.
And I been beaten, electric prodded. I have that scar still. Spit on, called every name you can imagine. And I wanted to tell my story, which is why it's Racism from the Eyes of a Child. I open the book, the introduction, I tell one of my first stories, the first story. And I just quickly tell you I was 5 years old. My mother grew up in a little small town, Marion, Alabama, and just today left the King Center to his anniversary.
Yes.
My mother went to high school with his wife, Coretta King.
Oh, wow.
In Marion, Alabama. And so during the summers, me and my brother and my mother would go down to Alabama, to Marion. My grandmother and my mother were like oil and vinegar. They didn't get along. This particular night, my mother got into an argument with her mother, and we left in the middle of the night, around 10 o'clock at night. Now, you have to picture on a dark country road, here we are walking on the side of the road, and in the distance we see lights from cars, and then we began to hear these horns, and they got closer and closer and closer, and then my mother grabbed me and my brother, and then she said, "We've got to jump in the woods, in the bushes." And so we got in the bushes on the side of the highway. My mother got on top of me. I remember her like it was yesterday. She started praying and told me to be quiet, don't say a word.
Wow.
Because I had started crying. And so she told my brother, who was older, Jesse, take your brother if anything happens, and you go up under that barbed wire fence where those cows are, and y'all just run as fast as y'all can. And so then finally the cars left and passed us by, and we got out of the bushes and got back onto the highway. Now remember, it's just a full moon and stars. There's no lights in Marion, Alabama highways. And then there was flags lined up on the highway. And as a kid would do, I picked them up, and my mother spanked my hand, told me to put them down. Well, that was a KKK rally. And I was very, very, very frightened by that. Because as a kid at 5 years old, you constantly ask the question, why? And I didn't understand. So that's why I named the book Racism from the Eyes of a Child, And if you've seen the cover, it's actually literally an eye, and inside of that eye is a demonstration that I'm showing and telling my story.
Okay. So you definitely had some experiences in life growing up in Alabama, and you've seen a lot, you've witnessed a lot. How has that racism transcended in the various phases of your life, from childhood, going to an HBCU, progressing to corporate America and into the entertainment industry?
Well, my book takes you through that journey. I wanted the reader to go through the journey from that day at 5 years old until, last year when I finished writing the book. And I take you through each one of those areas you just said. I tell history and research that my team did in Montgomery, Alabama, at the library there, to go back as far as my great-great-grandfather, Calvin Moore, who was born in 1846. I didn't know who Calvin Moore was. I didn't know my great-great-grandfather. I didn't know my grandmother had twin brothers, Sidney and Gitney Moore, which explains why Beyonce has twins. These were twins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot that I learned about myself. And we don't know the history. And part of racism is to erase our history.
Correct.
And so if we don't have our history, we don't have knowledge. And we don't have knowledge, we don't have power. I heard something today that was pretty profound. You know, slavery has never really left us.
Ever.
We are still enslaved. It's just has been presented a different way now. And now it's like a fog that we are under that's still slavery.
I want to touch on that, not to interrupt you for a moment, and then I'll come back to something else. But in your book, you talk about racism and colorism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to get on the topic of colorism in a moment. But what is your opinion about the latest advertisements, the subtle colorism that we see on mainstream television from these various branding companies and the use of their advertisements?
Well, you know, it's interesting because it's gone from when I was a child and when you were a child even, that we saw beauty was always presented as white.
Mm-hmm.
Now beauty, and I wouldn't say now, I've actually seen a difference. I would say 10 years ago, in terms of black folks, beauty was always portrayed as light complexion.
Yes.
But I do notice now two things. There's a lot of interracial
Mm-hmm.
that the advertisers are using now. But finally, for the first time, I see beauty presented from the darkest shade of black,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I've noticed that. I've consciously noticed that. So that's an improvement in my opinion.
Okay. Okay. So the colorism that you speak of, and I'm going to read a little excerpt that you have here in your book. You said, your mother stated, don't ever bring no nappy-headed girl
home.
Yes.
I wrote the book.
Yes.
So my mother, in all of her greatness, because there was a lot of greatness, my mother, again, went to high school with Coretta King, took the civil rights movement, was very instrumental in Gaston, Alabama, which we had the largest demonstration in America, was in Gaston, Alabama. But the one thing my mother was wrong, and it's because I think her mother probably felt the same way and told her the same thing. And that is, you know, not to bring home or date someone of a darker complexion or with our true roots of hair. And I internalized that as a child, as we do often as children. We internalize who we are today. You know, a lot of things we believe in is based on what we heard and were told and we saw in our childhood. And I show in my book a young boy that's 5 or 6 years old, and he's given 2 dolls and asked which one is beautiful, and he picked the white doll. So I internalized that, and I had to deal with that later in my life, and I talk about this in my book about the going to therapy
Mm-hmm.
And finally, over years, having that defining moment that my therapist and myself understood that trauma, very compulsive behavior that I had was based on racial trauma. There's a lot of people walking around that are traumatized by racism and don't even know it, and how it affects their behavior.
Unconscious conditioning and eroticized rage. Elaborate on that if you
Well,
could, please.
I talk about that. And again, this is through therapy
Mm-hmm.
that term, people don't walk around knowing the term eroticized rage. Probably the first time you ever heard it. And to the readers, it'll be, for most of them, the first time they've ever heard that. It's a therapeutic term used in therapy. But what it means is whenever, and I was very, very guilty of this, and it shows my growth. I used to say, I only date white girls.
Mm-hmm.
Or I used to say, I only date light complexion girls. I don't date dark women. Again, internalizing what my mother said. But when someone says that and consciously say that, and especially men, black men, that's typically because of a lot of anger and buildup of anger. And we find the fact that we are dating a white woman and the sexual experience involved with that, it's our way of getting even or getting our power back. And this is all subconsciously, sometimes consciously, but that's what eroticized rage is. It's when black men feel as though we're getting our power back to the white man by dating his woman.
Okay. All right. So you've got the racism outside of the house growing up. You've got colorism inside of the house. As a child, how do you think that transcended you or developed you into the Mr. Knowles that sits here today?
Well, again, I went to white schools like yourself. I remember my first day of English at Litchfield Junior High School, 600 white kids, 6 black kids. Because I like to paint the story. You can imagine what that looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Jones was the English teacher, white man, just a really, really nice man. And he asked me, only black kid in his class, about 50 kids. He asked me to read a paragraph. We all had to read a paragraph. He just singled me out. And I read my paragraph, and I made a mistake. Now, imagine my first day of junior high school. Outside was these white parents yelling and screaming. The white kids were not accepting us at all, calling us every word you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And my first hour there, I make a mistake, and all the kids in class laughed at me and started throwing spitballs at me. And that was my first hour at Litchfield Junior High School. And again, as kids, we internalize all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment for me that I said, these white folks will never laugh at me again. A, I'm going to be prepared. And B, I'm going to focus on being the very best that I could be. Well, that turned out to work in a good way and a bad way, because it developed this compulsive person that overdoes everything, and so that's where it started for me. And then when I went into my corporate life,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's happenstance or coincidence that at Xerox I got promoted to the medical division,
Mm-hmm.
selling zero radiography for breast cancer, and being one of the only and first blacks in that division. And then when I went to Philips Medical Systems, and I was one of the first black men, black people, period, to sell MRI and CT scanners in America.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Johnson & Johnson and was one of the first blacks to be a neurosurgical specialist in America. So I don't think that's happenstance that my childhood mirrored my professional career.
Right.
Of being the first.
Okay. All right. So what's the goal for your readers? What would you like your readers? What's the takeaway that you would like your readers to leave with?
Well, I've already, the book came out the top of February.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've certainly gotten a number of feedback. I've done a number of TV shows. And so what this book and what I wanted to do, we have to continuously tell the message of racial discrimination that's happening still in America in so many ways, and we can't think that we're even remotely have overcome because we haven't. And so one of the things is to just continuously to tell the story, tell the message. There's a thing I call social courage.
Mm-hmm.
And social courage is for all of you when you hear racism, when you hear sexism, when you see xenophobia, homophobia behavior, that you speak out quicker, sooner, faster, and you make a difference with it. And that's what I want this book to instill. I want this book also to make folks uncomfortable. This is not a book for black people. This is a book for all people. And I can tell because, if you go to MathewKnowles.com and order the book, I sign it and send it and ship it to you. So I get to see the names of the people who ordered the book. And I can tell you 60% of the books that have been ordered through my office, and now it's been about 400, majority, 6%, are white females.
Interesting.
So there's some sadness inside of that. I would have thought it would have been a reverse. But, people are wanting to grow, learn, and that gives me joy to know that people are accepting this book. A lot of criticism, not criticism, but a lot of conversation and dialogue within communities and black communities talking about colorism. I've gotten I'm a public speaker, so I've gotten several speaking engagements on racism.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to continue the story. I wanted to give that social courage and instill in people, don't be quiet and shy. I talk about everything like flying black. When
Yes.
I get on a plane and how many times I didn't dress like the white men because I'm in the music industry, and I put my bag up, flight attendant, oh, I'm sorry, that's reserved.
Right.
I can tell you a story that just happened to me in D.C. Just last week, and I'm at the hotel that I typically stay at, and they have a club level.
Mm-hmm.
And I got there at 9:30. It was a bunch of white folks, men on one side of the room. They are loud. They've been drinking. There was a bunch of white women on the opposite side. They were loud and drinking, and all of them were also on their phones. Well, at 9:45, and I'm talking on my phone, and a little young 20-something white boy comes over and puts a sign that says, "Please do not talk on your phone."
Wow.
And so I got off. I was talking to my wife. I said, "Hey, I got to call you back." And I said, "Young man, come here." I said, "Why did you put this on my table?"
Right.
First of all, it's rude, but it's also 9:45. There's only me and that man right there. Well, you're not supposed to be on the phone. I said, "Well, young man, I don't understand. I'm at a club at the Ritz-Carlton. Why I pay? That's why I pay extra." No, I'm sorry, here's our rules. I was like, "Young man, did you not see the other people, the white women and the white guys talking on their phone?"
Sounds like everyone.
So he was like, "No, I didn't see them." I said, "You're right. You didn't see them. And this is America. A lot of white people, they don't see the other white people because they feel they're privileged.
Mm-hmm.
But they see us." I said, "You're right. You saw me. You saw me because I'm black. So you didn't see the other people. You're just like most people in America. You see us.
Right.
We bring that fear to police officers. They see us. They don't have that same fear when they stop a white man or a white female. Black woman, when they get stopped, they can't cry, "I'm going to call my dad." You can't do that.
I can't.
But a lot of your white counterparts your age, they can say, "Oh my God, I need to call my dad." And they're given the privilege of doing that.
Why do you think that fear
Because slavery is still, we haven't, to think that we completely, it's just a different color. Racism is a side sub-component of slavery. And it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there in America. And that same fear that's here today is the fear once we were freed that white people in America began to feel. That now these slaves, they're not on the field. So my barber was telling a story about his dad, who grew up in Nacogdoches, Texas. So his dad, who was a little older than me,
mm-hmm.
and would now be in his 80s if he was alive, he bought some ice cream at a Dairy Queen, and a white Dairy Queen, and he was a kid. On his way home, him and his friend, the police arrested them. And they arrested him and his friend because he got too close to the white woman when he got his order of ice cream.
What year was this?
And we're talking 1960,
okay.
1960 something.
Okay.
I mean, those are the type of stories that we can tell over and over and over again. And it's still today the same. I checked into a hotel here in Atlanta. The white woman who checked me in, her energy was, she was not very polite. And today I call you out on that.
Right.
I call everybody out on that, and then she wanted to charge me extra for the club. Now, I've been in Philadelphia last week. I've been in D.C. last week, and I'm staying at the same Ritz-Carlton. And yes, Ritz-Carlton, I'm going to call you out. Because right now, that's what I do. I call people out, companies out, every interview. You do some crazy, I'm going to call you out in front of millions of people. And so, she made me pay $200 extra for the club. Now, I just did D.C. and Philadelphia. I didn't have to do that. And a black woman behind the desk was paying attention. And then, she, as I was walking away, said, "Well, here's my card, Mr. Knowles." And I went up. I didn't like the room. I came back down, and the white young lady had left.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, "Hey, well, I'm going to upgrade you." And, it's a different energy that we get.
So here we are in this Hip Hop Weekly platform, and you are a mogul, at least in my eyes, in the entertainment industry. What advice do you have, or would you like to give these young artists that are up and coming? And even not so much the young up and coming artists, but artists who have technically made it already. What advice do you give these young men and women of color who have to deal in the entertainment industry, not only as an entertainer, but as a business person in the industry?
I'm a college professor, right?
Correct.
At Texas Southern University. I took this semester off 8 years, so I've been doing this a while. The sadness that sometimes I feel is that just like some white people feel privileged, that's not the word that our black youth feel. They don't feel privileged because they're not privileged. They feel entitled. Some of our black youth, they feel entitled, and they have the wrong understanding of how success is done in life, not music, but in entrepreneurship, in having a job in corporate America. First of all, I've learned that if one person that's listening buy my book and learn, my sadness is actually probably the truth of it is you have how many thousands of followers?
Yes. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're looking at this from entertainment rather than from educational, that they'll go and get a book and learn something. Our young black youth, they don't want to do that. They don't want to read a book. They don't want to do the extra that we are successful. That's what we do. Successful people read. Successful people grow. And I'm saying that to you, and most of you still aren't going to do that. The majority of you, because you've been conditioned to be average. You've been conditioned to be average. So shame on you. If you're average, I'm not going to feel sorry for that anymore. So we're giving people the tools to be more. I met a young man today, and I asked him, he probably was 12 years old, and I asked him, how are you doing in school? He said, good. I said, young man, the next time I see you, I hope you tell me you're great. Good? Who wants to be good? I only want greatness. And unfortunately, not a lot of black folks want to be great. They want to be good because they've been conditioned that that's all you can be in life. So they don't want to learn. They don't want to grow. These artists that are successful, these artists are great. They're not good. They practice every day, all day. Beyonce practiced 3 months out of a year, 7 days a week to do 3 minutes on the Grammy Awards. None of y'all are willing to do that kind of effort.
Y'all hear that?
So when you're successful, it's because of you. It ain't because of the music industry. It's because you're not good. How about that? Most people aren't good because they don't put in the work.
And there you have it. There you have it.
It's a fact. We put out 37,000 albums a year, some kind of number close to that in the major labels. Mm-hmm. And then just independently, we put out about 100,000 albums a year. It's 1% in major labels. Now, if I tell your listeners do quick math on 1% of 37,000, you'd be surprised how many people can't figure that out because we haven't been taught critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Well, it's 370.
Correct.
And out of 37,000, that means that only 370 are success. That's a lot of failures. Same with independent. It's 5%. It's a little higher, but still, we're talking 5% of 100,000. So, it's a lot of failure. And so you have to ask, why is it so much failure? People don't want to put the commitment. It's not their passion. Mm-hmm. Most people are doing it for other reasons. I mean, how do you know when you see somebody and they have CEO on their card, they're a fool.
Why did you say that?
Because only a fool would put CEO on their card. You probably might have it on yours.
I do not.
Because a CEO is when you have a president, first of all. Mm-hmm. And a CEO typically has at least 50 employees. But when it's just you and you got CEO on your card, you look like a fool. Because that's called founder, not CEO. What are you CEO of?
So what the opportunity, in this age, you hear a lot of young people saying, oh, no one's giving me an opportunity. I don't have this opportunity. All the opportunities are given to white people and other. Do you buy into that?
No, I buy into that it's harder for us. Mm-hmm. But that going in. That's going in. So that means you have to be better prepared. You've got to work harder. And so a lot of young people, your millennials today, want to be an artist, a record label CEO. They want to be on their own clothing line.
Everything. Rather
than just be great at one thing, not understanding that once you're great, then you have an audience. And with that audience, you can sell all sort of stuff. But you first build your audience, because it's a simple formula for success. Audience equals sales.
Right.
Build an audience, you can sell them anything. but you got to focus on one thing.
Okay.
My first cousin, Robert Avery, who just recently, last year, 3 years ago, was given by President Obama an award for his civil rights, the work he did in civil rights. And he's my first cousin, my sister. She talks about growing up in Alabama. I have another cousin, first cousin, who lived in Cleveland that didn't experience the racism in Cleveland, only when she came to our grandparents. And then I have someone from Indiana, who's my second cousin. His grandmother, my grandmother, were sisters. And he gives his perspective. And someone, Barbara Christopher, who went to Litchfield with those 6 blacks, she was one of those. She gives her perspective. So a part of the book is biographic. And then a part of the book is just talking about experiences in racism as it exists in America today. So it's a combination of both.
Okay. So what can we expect next from you with this book and any other things that you've got going on?
Well, this is my 25th year in the music industry.
Congratulations.
25 years. Very proud of that. So at Music World, I have 3 new artists.
Okay.
And this will be my last run with working with new artists. But I have 3 new artists that we will. His name is Damola, and he's a native of Africa. He lives in Houston, Nigeria, and that whole sound is coming, is what we're beginning to hear more and more. And so that's an artist. And I have a girl group, Blush, 2 rappers and a vocalist.
Okay.
And then I have a solo rapper that we'll be introducing. And so I'm working those projects, but I enjoy writing as an author. I also enjoy teaching. I enjoy public speaking. So you'll see more public speaking. But my next book is almost completed, and I hope to have by Black Music Month, which is June.
Yes.
And it's called The Emancipation of Slaves Through Music.
Oh, can you give us a little synopsis on that?
Well, what people don't understand is that when you had these slaves, first of all, slavery was first in Europe. And then in America. We had indentured servants here initially in America that were white immigrants from Europe.
Okay.
And again, like I'm a nerd type. And I like to learn, and as an educator, I have to be on point, right? So I have to know my stuff. And then the Destiny's Child, the Untold Story, I hope I have ready for the holiday.
Okay.
The book. And then we're looking at maybe a musical, maybe a movie, but tying in Destiny's Child, it'll be a 3-way approach to it and to the group.
We are all interested in that.
To find out what I'm doing, go to MathewKnowles.com. And Matthew is with 1 T, MathewKnowles.com. It'll tell you all of my speaking engagements. It'll tell you how to talk to me on social media. It'll tell you I have the Knowles Institute, which is an online e-learning courses, continual education courses. It'll tell you about some of my philanthropy efforts. And so I always ask people go there. They order the book. I'll sign the book. I'll ship it to you. And hopefully in 24 hours, your viewers will go to Kindle. I want them to go to Kindle because that's where the book is number 2. Push it to number 1. And hopefully you and I can talk soon. I've enjoyed this. I'm going to be back to Atlanta 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
I'm coming back in July.
So MathewKnowles.com, go to Kindle, download the book. Let's make this man number 1. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again.
Thank you.